let's say the decision came down to you, and it was up to you to fix the black community. How would you do it?
Ah, whew, goodness, that's a good one. That's a good one because we got so many needs.
I had to come with it. I had to come with it with you now.
We have so many needs. You know.
Yo, 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 welcome to the Black Club. I'm your host and founder of the show, B Note. Today I got a guest with me who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway. She's a proud alumni of California State University, Fullerton. She's achieved a bachelor's in history and African American studies, her master's in U.S. history, master's in higher education and student affairs, and her PhD in educational studies. She's an educational activist, a devoted philanthropist, and advocate for Black women. She was a featured expert on the Al Jazeera documentary, The Big Picture, A Race for America. She's a member of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, a member of the Association of Black Women Historians, a member of the California Faculty Association. She serves on the board of directors for the Historical Society of Southern California. She spent 7 years in higher education administration as a program coordinator, program manager, and director, along with 3 years as a secondary social studies and language arts teacher for Los Angeles Unified School District. She's the associate dean for personnel and curriculum in the College of Liberal Arts at California State University, Long Beach. She is Dr. Donna J. Nicol.
Thank you.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Was that okay?
Oh yeah, that was
That okay?
perfect. That was more than I was expecting.
I try, I try a little bit.
Yeah.
You grew up in Willowbrook, right?
Yeah, Willowbrook. So, well, I grew up in Compton, and we moved around parts of Compton.
Oh,
So, initially grew up
okay,
in Compton proper, and then I was about 10 years old, we moved to Willowbrook, which is wedged between Compton and Watts. And my
okay,
family has deep roots in the area, so that's why we stayed because my grandmother was an
okay,
activist, and so we stayed in the neighborhood until I was in my 20s.
okay. Did you like try sports or anything in
Oh
school?
yeah, yeah. I played volleyball, but I was probably best at softball. In my last year in high school, everybody was doing track and field, so I said, "Well, I can do track and field because I want to be with my friends." So I went all.
Right.
I ended up didn't know I was as strong as I was, so I ended up all state in shot put and discus just because I wanted to hang out with my friends.
Okay. So in '95, you got your bachelor's in history and African American studies.
Yep.
In '99, you got your master's in U.S. history. 2002, you got your master's in higher education and student affairs. And in 2007, you got your PhD in educational studies.
Yep.
How did you stay so focused and driven at like such an early age?
Well, part of it is I'm not a first generation college graduate. I am a fourth generation college
Right.
graduate. So my great grandfather was a doctor
Okay.
in the U.S. Army in World War One and Two, and so I had a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
family support behind me, pushing me. But also, I studied things that I was interested in instead of studying things that probably would have been more lucrative. I
Right.
studied the stuff that made me feel joy about going to class, and learning
Right.
about my history as a Black person was really important for me at a young age because we didn't get, I was lucky. I went to predominantly Black schools where the teachers taught us Black history. So I didn't have
Right.
the
Right.
a lot of the other Black students that I went to school with had learned, like learned about Black folks once they got into college, but I had already learned a lot of this stuff. So I didn't have imposter syndrome when I went to school. I knew who I was, and I knew I
Right.
was smart enough, so I didn't question it.
When it comes to education in the black community, like when I do my research, we basically last in every
Yep.
category. What can we do to change that?
Well, I think that we need to start much earlier with, providing kids guidance. Uh, like during the summer, we didn't go to summer school. Summer school came to us because my
Okay.
mother and them, and I mean everybody, would bring lessons to us, and they would take us to
Right.
the free stuff that was in the neighborhood so that we could get exposed. So I got exposed to opera and plays and all of that stuff because we did all the free stuff. I mean, I was a welfare kid, so it wasn't like we had a bunch of money. It was just that we knew
Right.
how to
Right.
utilize all the resources in the neighborhood. And so I
Right.
did vacation Bible school, and I did, I did all of the things so that by the time the school year come around, I was ahead of everybody because I had been reading and going to different places. And we were catching the bus. We were on in LA. We call it RTD, rough, tough, and dirty. We used to get on the bus all the time, and if I want, my grandmother would take us, to like expose us, like in terms of our culinary exposure. She would get us on the bus and we would go to the pier out here so we could learn, learn about fish and how to prepare it and all this other
Right.
type of stuff. So I think that this idea that we got to wait for education to come to us is part of the
Hmm.
problem, is that we're being too passive and expecting it to come to us when we have to go out and reach for it.
I agree. What impact does parental involvement and like the environment have on the educational success of black
Oh,
students?
it plays a tremendous role. I've been a faculty member for over 20 years, and the students, even in the college level, who have family support, they just do a whole lot better. I found that a lot of the Black women in my classes were juggling, either raising kids or raising their mama's kids, uh, while trying
Right. Right.
while trying to um, study, take classes, work, have relationships and a social life, and they were pulled in too many directions, and so not
Yeah.
having the family behind them really made a lot of these young women struggle. And for the Black men, oh my God, it's absolutely critical because brothers will try, and then like if it don't go well, if everything doesn't line up perfectly, they'll pull out, like
Yeah.
and so that kind of I call these students one and done. Like they're going to give it one shot. But
Right.
what you need in a university setting, or if you even in high school, is you need a balance of challenge and support. You need people to support you,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
you also need to be challenged.
Right. We all know there's a disparity between the black community and other communities when it comes to like equal opportunities. But in my opinion, most blacks, the opportunities that we do have, they don't take advantage of. So nowadays, is it more of still the design system, or is it just us not taking advantage of the opportunities that we presented?
That's a good question. I think it's a mixture of both um, and so my sister likes to say, how you know how bad a school is if you ain't gone to school, And so when people
Right.
use that
Right.
excuse of, well, the schools are bad, so I'm not going to go, it's like, but you haven't gone. So um, we have to. There's personal responsibility in terms of taking advantage of the opportunities, what's happening in school, the summer programs, whatever, learning how to swim even. Um,
Right.
but also the system by design is predicated on you not knowing that there are opportunities out there. Like I told my
Yeah.
students,
Yeah.
if you want to go to grad school, go apply for the fee waiver for the GRE prep courses because Princeton Review will pay for it, and they were like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you they are obligated to give you something free, but you need to
Right.
read that website through and through. Information is critical. We have more information than ever
Yes.
before, but we are
Yes.
more ignorant than we ever have been."
Yes. And speaking of that, yo, check out my new store, the Black Club Store. We've got men's clothes, women's clothes, kids' clothes, even got playing cards for you spades players out there. You can even get a Black Club pet bowl for you pet owners. We love the pets too. And we're still growing. So there'll be more to come. You can go to the Black Club website at theblackclubpodcast.com and click on the Black Club store. The link is also in the description. So head on over to the Black Club store and get your Black Club gear today. Let's say you have someone that wants to better educate themselves, but they don't know where to start or what to start with. What's your advice to that person?
Well, I think one part, the I don't want to say YouTube because that gets to be slippery slope kind of thing because the quality ain't always there. Uh, but
Right, right,
you can start with your if you're in high school or whatever, you can start with your teachers and ask them to give you a reading list, and then take that reading list and go on to Wikipedia and go to the bottom of the page, and they will give you a list of readings. Take that list of readings and build a bibliography of readings from there. And so you can use those readings, you can use those websites. You can actually build your own kind of library so that you can educate
right,
yourself. And I say a
right.
lot of times what was my advantage because I was a fourth generation college graduate is that people were showing me how to get information. It wasn't I was smarter than anybody else. It was just that I knew how to access information. And that's the critical difference between black folks and everybody else is that these other groups are
Yes,
they know how to get, to advocate for themselves in terms of healthcare and so forth.
yes,
Instead of kind of
yes,
being stepping back and being the recipient, they go out and take. And we're
yes.
expecting folks to be nice to us and they're not going to.
I don't know why we sit back and wait on somebody to save us.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen. What what role does education play in empowering black women?
Say that last part again.
What role does education play in empowering black women?
Oh yeah, I mean, education is important because not only is it going to help you in terms of setting yourself apart from the pack. um, it lets you know when you're being cheated. It lets you know when people are,
Yeah.
doing you dirty. Knowing how to look at a
Right.
contract and say that doesn't quite make sense. Even if you don't know how
Right.
to read all the legalese in something, you know how to look at something and say, "Well, my money don't look right here. Let me go. Let me go
Right.
ask somebody for some help." Because that's the other thing too is not being afraid to ask questions of stuff that you don't know.
True.
So
True.
education
You
allows
had
you to,
mentioned.
oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
It allows you,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, it allows you to be curious. Uh, and once you start to get an education, you can't step back and say, you can't make an excuse for why you don't know something. My teacher used to say to me,
Right.
an excuse is the skin of the truth packed with a lie.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had mentioned your grandmother
Hmm.
earlier, and I had read, about her work that she had done, where she co-founded the Office for Black Community Development.
Yeah.
Is she who inspired you to get into
Oh
activism?
yeah, absolutely. I was a little kid when my grandmother got a $1.19 million grant from Jerry Brown in the 70s in order to create a black supermarket
Wow.
training program. Because after
And in the 70s, that was a
that
lot of
was
money.
huge.
Yeah.
After the Watts riots, we didn't have any grocery stores in the neighborhood, and we would have to drive a pretty significant amount and or catch the bus multiple buses in order to go to a grocery store to get fresh food. You know, we got the liquor stores, obviously, but you can't you can't feed a
Right.
family off of liquor store food. Uh,
Right.
and so my grandmother was adamant about getting fresh food into the neighborhood. And so what we did, and I'm saying we because she made me go with her and participate. And I was little, I
Hmm.
was, maybe 5 or 6 years old. And she opened the first food co op across the street from the Imperial Courts projects. And so we got our
Okay.
first locally owned, black owned grocery store. And as a little girl, I had to go into the projects with a little elevator pitch and knock on people's doors and sell memberships to the food co-op. And people would pay
Yeah.
$25 a month, and they would get 2 bags of groceries of fresh food that they could not get unless they drove 10, 15 miles away. So she had modeled for me very early what activism and being connected to the community means.
Oh man. Um, I got a list. I want to play like a little game
Okay.
with you. I'm gonna see if you know. If you know, you since you're a historian,
Okay.
let me see if you know. You know who this person is. I'm gonna read off their list of accomplishments and see if you can
Okay.
recognize. Okay. She was the first non-white woman to be tenured and promoted to associate professor in women and gender studies at CSU Fullerton.
Myself.
She was the first woman to be promoted to full professor in African studies at CSU Dominguez
That would be
Hills.
me.
Oh, and that's where she was chair of the development, chair of the department for like 6 or 7 years
Yep.
too. I had to throw that in there too, and and she was the first black person in senior leadership in the history of the College of Liberal Arts. I bet you don't know who that was.
I don't know. Could it be me?
When you hear stuff like that, your accomplishments, how does that make you feel?
I'm proud of it, but I'm simultaneously sad about the fact that here we are in 2024 and I'm still the first. Like, when I became the first woman of color at Cal State Fullerton in women's studies, I was the first
Mhm.
one hired. I was the first non-white woman hired in women's studies.
God.
Uh, and so it's this, we automatically assume that um, when you get these black first, that that's some indicator of progress. But it
Right.
actually is an indicator of how
It's a
far
negative.
behind we really are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
simultaneously proud, but at the same time, and it wasn't easy being the first because you're lonely and you're
Right.
carrying the race on your back. You know, a lot of times
Yeah.
you're carrying the women on your back too. And so, you just got to learn different strategies for how to survive. And for me, it's always been I front load my politics. So people know who they're dealing with
Okay.
up front. So
Right.
there's
Right.
no
Right.
illusion. I'm not going to be quiet and mousy. So you need to know. So you can not deal with me if you don't want to, but um, I think that's what's helped me out. But I know a lot of black women, particularly, that get into these universities and struggle because they assume we're incompetent. They assume we're super aggressive.
Mhm.
They assume that we got here because of affirmative action, even though in California it's been outlawed since 1996. You know, so it's just there's all these assumptions about who we are and what we do and what we can produce if they would just leave us alone and let us do the work.
I, that's crazy because they don't want us involved in anything they got going on, but they don't want us to do our own thing either.
Mm-mm.
I don't understand that.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges that African Americans particularly have is that we don't run any us we don't really authentically run our own institutions. Even the
Right.
HBCUs, we get
Eh,
funding from
yes.
somebody else. And
Yes.
because of that, we're constantly putting our hands out, like asking for people to give us an opportunity, and they don't want us there.
I mean, they've shown us time after time,
Yeah.
um, what are the most pressing issues currently facing Black women in the fight for equality and justice today?
Ooh, man. I think one of the biggest issues is economic justice. We're getting underpaid for the same level of work, coming in with the same, if not more, credentials than other folks, and
Yes.
getting paid
Yes.
so significantly less. And so that's
Yes.
keeping us out of the um, housing market, which means that we won't be able to get assets to pass on to do transgenerational wealth. It means that we got these health disparities, uh, that people with better insurance or, different skin tone will end up, being able to advocate for themselves, and Black women are constantly hitting this barrier. I think beyond the economic
Right.
part is that, um, because of the hyper focus right now with the Republicans and conservatives on trying to control women's bodies, in with
Mhm.
getting rid of abortion, and now they're talking about getting rid of birth control pills. um, so one of the ways in which a lot of women, white, Black, or indifferent, made progress is that they could determine when they wanted to have babies. Not, it was, if
Right.
you had
Right.
children, it was a foregone conclusion you would stay at home.
Right.
Um, so I think that's a big pressing issue, and I think another big pressing issue that we don't talk about enough for in the Black community, and we're starting to, which I'm appreciative of, is issues around mental health and the
Yes.
levels of stress that people, it's like this black tax that you're constantly paying, and you really.
And it's with us, it's already like inherited anyway,
Mhm.
stress and trauma from everything that we went
Yeah,
through.
yeah, I mean, and so, and then there's always been this kind of community type of hesitance to talk about these issues,
Yes.
in any kind of way. We used to say, oh, that boy, he a little touched, like we would have these little
Right.
these little
Right.
euphemisms for folks, but sometimes them touch
Yeah.
folks really need a lot of help. You know.
Yeah.
hmm
And that's what I want to do with this show, with this platform.
and that really is an important thing for us to be able to talk to each other, because sometimes we don't have family members that are supportive enough. So you need to find resources. I always say, if your family ain't acting right, go create one.
Right. So, what inspired you to get into history?
Well, I'm a third generation history major, and so
Oh,
my
okay.
grandmother was a historian. My mother was a historian. We all studied
Mm,
different aspects, though. My grandmother studied Chinese history, which is, everybody's like, how is that possible? But
right.
she was always kind of fascinated with it, and her mother
Right.
was Chinese Filipino, so I think that's
Okay.
part of it.
Okay.
So my grandmother studied Chinese history and Chinese language, so she spoke fluent Mandarin. And then my mother
Okay.
studied Latin American history, and speaks fluent Spanish, and had lived in Guatemala for a while. My mother wanted to, like, if you think about those kind of hippie folks that would
Right.
just
Right. Yeah.
travel. That's my mother. My mother got on the bus. I didn't even know
Okay.
you could do this. She took the bus to Guatemala because she wanted to have an authentic experience. And I was just like, what? I was like,
Firsthand.
yeah. And so she wanted to see the pyramids down there, and so she did this like kind of work exchange program, uh, where they would pay her
Okay.
room and board, and she would work and stuff like that. So I was always curious about history, and the way in which we talk about it as a family is almost like a story. Like,
Right.
a
Right.
lot of people
Okay.
hate history because they're like, it's just names and dates, and it's like, yeah, but if they taught it like, this person did this and it had this impact, and you know and the reason
Or at
why you
least the
have
real
this.
history.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I was always curious about Black folks, so that's why I specialize in African American history.
Yes. That's what made me get started with doing all of this. I wanted to know the first thing I researched, I wanted to know who black people were before slavery.
Hmm.
And that got me on this long
Yeah,
road, what I'm saying, to this point,
yeah.
How important is knowing our history?
It's something that once you know it, people can't take it away from you.
Yes.
And because it centers who you are in the world. Because you know, it's what did Du Bois say? We got this kind of double consciousness, how we see ourselves and how the world sees us. And if we spend
Right.
too much time worrying about how other people see us, we don't get an opportunity to learn how to love ourselves and what we bring to the
Right.
table. And so I think it's important for us to like situate who we are. And I used to tell my students, I said, you're gonna get angry when you learn most of this stuff. But you can
Yeah.
take that anger and channel it. And they were like, well, give us an example. I said, my
Yeah.
entire dissertation was about how people used money to get rid of Black studies programs back in the 80s and the 90s. I said, I was mad at one Black man. His name was Ward Connerly, and he tried to get rid of affirmative action here in California. And so I said, who
Mm.
is funding this Negro? And I literally, from that question, because I was so angry, because he was trying to get rid of Black
Right.
graduation celebrations out here. And I said, well, who is funding him? And once I asked myself that question, it set me on this whole journey where I am today.
Okay. Okay. So, other than your grandmother and your mother, is there anybody from our history that also might have been an inspiration
Yeah, I mean, well, the woman I just
for
wrote a
you?
book about, her name was Claudia Hampton. And
I'm gonna get into that.
she really inspires how I function now as an administrator. Um, because she knew she had to deal with the racism and the sexism in ways that white women couldn't deal with it. And so
Right.
um, I learned a lot from her just while I was, and I've been researching this for a while. And so
Mhm.
she's been a real big inspiration to me. And then another person who's been an inspiration, her name was Queen Nzinga. She was the she was the military leader initially for modern day Congo, um, but she
Okay.
became the queen eventually. But during her reign, Black people were never enslaved. It wasn't until her death that the
Mm.
Portuguese went into Congo, and so I take a lot of
Mm.
inspiration from this sister who was a military leader, a queen, and kept colonizers out of her country.
Yeah, I like that. Let's. Do you have a brand or a business that you would like to promote? Drop by the club. Let us share your story your way. Go to the Black Club website at theblackclubpodcast.com and click on Be a Guest. The link will also be in the description. Let us see what kind of magic we can create together. The decision came down to you, and it was up to you to fix the Black community. How would you do it?
Ah, whew, goodness, that's a good one. That's a good one because we got so many needs.
I had to come with it. I had to come with it with you now.
We have so many needs. You know, I don't know that reparations would solve it. I
I
I don't think so.
you no,
I think
I don't
we
think so.
need, and I think we need institution building more so
Yes.
than money. I mean, give us the money to build institutions, yes, but
Yeah.
but we absolutely need to do institution building, and that is not just educational institutions, but we also need to
Yes.
have what do they call it? Mutual aid societies that we used to have. Was it the AME Church back in, they used to be called the Free African Society. And after slavery,
Okay.
they had created the black owned cemeteries, black owned um, foster homes, all kinds of institution so that people who found themselves in need could go to the Free African Society and put in a request, and the community
Okay.
would come in and support, because I think that we don't have a sense of collectiveness that we used to. So we'll say, well, black people this and
Yes.
black people that, and we actually got to start parsing out actually them black people and those black people over there, because
Yeah.
we're all not, we're at different socioeconomic statuses, different regions, and
Right.
our approach to
Right.
life is a lot different because we don't have that same ethos. And so institution building, I think, would help us to rebuild a sense of collectiveness. Like we all got a stake in this. Instead of having
Yes.
people at the top and people at the bottom, we need people to all kind of like what Native Americans have done with their casino um, revenue. Like there's one tribe in Connecticut for sure. What they have done is, yeah, they built the casinos, but every member of the tribe gets a job, gets a car, gets
Mm-hmm.
education for their children, and they're set up for life. And we need to take that model and run with it.
You think we can?
I think we could, but I think one of the problems is that we got a leadership problem, and we don't know who's going to
Yes.
be. I think too often we rely on one leader when we need to have leaders at different levels. So you're going to need
Right.
people who's going to help us with our families and how to raise and nurture families. We're going to need people at the kind of middle level, which is the community level, and then we're going to need folks who's going to
Mm.
need to negotiate at the top, if you want to call it that. And everybody needs to play a role instead of
Right.
being jealous about, oh, they higher than me. And it's like, well, if you don't like public speaking, you don't need to be out in the front, you know,
Right.
but we
Everything ain't for everybody, you
exactly,
know?
exactly, and so play the role and be good at it and be
Mhm.
proud of what you
Yes.
contribute. And during the civil rights movement, black women stepped to the back and said, black men go ahead. Because they were organizers in and of themselves. They organized the Montgomery bus boycott,
Yes.
but they said, we don't have the oratory skills that King has. Push him to the front. We'll step in the back, and we're okay with that role. But nowadays, it's like, you think you better than me, and all of that type of stuff. When it's like we all, God gives us different types of gifts.
Yes.
You know.
When it comes to Black history,
Hmm.
we've had a lot of amazing people, right? A lot of them were Black women,
Hmm.
like you spoke of. Names like Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, right? But there's also a lot of Black women whose names that don't get talked about that much. You know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna name a few of them, and I'm gonna see. I want you to tell me what they did if you recognize
Okay.
who they are. All right, Ella Baker.
So Ella Baker was responsible for helping to uh, she helped create the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She was also involved
Okay.
with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She was originally part of the NAACP. So she was the one who was trying to push the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to include more young people in the movement.
Yeah. Okay. Josephine Baker.
Josephine Baker was a stage actress, a singer, a dancer, went to France, eventually said, I'm done with the US and their racism. I'll go there to the French. And she raised a number of children, adopted a number of children.
Dorothy Height.
Dorothy Height was one of the founding members of the National Council of Negro Women. She was also a president of
Hmm.
Delta Sigma Theta, Sorority Incorporated. And so she was really critical in advising presidents and other types of leaders.
And this one right here, she's from my state, Arkansas. So
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you know what she did. Daisy
So
Bates.
Daisy Bates was responsible for helping prepare the Little Rock Nine. She was involved with the
Yes.
NAACP, but she helped to groom those students to get them ready for the psychological terror and trauma
Yes.
that they would have to deal with when desegregating Central High School.
You know what? Hey man, look, you on you you on your stuff over here. But why aren't more Black women like this celebrated?
I think that most of the time when history is written, it's written either by men, or there's this kind of
Yes.
triumphant masculine story, and
Right.
so that women are seen as being in these kind of supportive roles at best. Um, and at least for the women that we just talked about, uh, these women weren't fighting to be in the front. They were just fighting to be
Right.
heard. And I think that
Right.
is an important distinction there. That they wanted to make change, and they could make it at the community level. So there's three levels of like being in the world. So that's the micro level, that's the individual. There's the meso, which is community, and then there's the macro, that's the big wider society. We always talk
Okay.
about the individual, and then we talk about the wider society. We miss the community level. That's where Black women operate the
Right.
best. And it's the
Right.
part that we miss when we document those histories.
As associate dean, what are the main responsibilities and goals of your office?
So my position particularly looks at hiring faculty.
Okay.
One of my big goals is to help to diversify the faculty. I also deal with any kind of conflict resolution within the departments. So I have 27 departments. We have 285 tenure track faculty, almost 500 lecturer faculty. So, of course, helping
Okay.
putting out those fires. I'm also responsible for all the curriculum. That means getting all the courses approved, any kind of new degree programs, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So, it's a job that requires me to do a lot of high touch with folks. I do a lot of just listening to people, and then kind of brainstorming a plan on how to, particularly when it comes to those personnel matters between people. So that's really part of the job.
Okay. Okay. So, how can these schools, whether it's high school or college, how can these educational institutions better support the success of our Black students?
I honestly think that one of the at least I'm going to go with predominantly white institutions because that's what I work in. Um, Even though this
Okay.
school ain't predominantly white anymore, but that's a whole nother that's a complicated that's a complicated story. But one of the things was that was useful to Black students, even me coming up, was that we operated like an underground railroad network. And what I mean by this is, if a student came to me and said, "Hey, Dr. Nicol, I'm having, I might have to leave because I don't have financial aid." And I was like, "Have you talked to the folks in financial aid?" And they say, "No, they keep giving me the runaround." It's like, okay, hold on, let me call the people I know over there
Right.
and say, "I got the student. I'm gonna send Brandon directly to you." And then I tell
Right.
you, "Hey, Brandon, I've already talked, to Miss Rosa. Miss Rosa is waiting for you to come talk to her. If you don't come talk to her within, that period of time, I'm gonna know. And then if you miss out on some scholarship money or whatever, then that's gonna be on you. So I'm
Right.
supporting you, but I'm challenging you to follow up." And a lot of the Black students here have been struggling with that help seeking behavior where they don't ask for
Hmm.
help in time. And so, one of the things that we have to do as a university, and Black faculty and staff in particular, is to let the students know, you can come to me and I'm going to support you. And I got a network of people who's going to follow up,
Hmm.
because the students can get lost. We got 40,000 students here. It's easy to get lost in that
Right.
shuffle.
Right.
And when you only see a handful of Black folks, it's like, well, where do you turn to? You turn to your Black faculty and staff. And there's research that shows if you don't have faculty and staff that look like you, you're not going to do well.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
because my role is to hire faculty, I put a premium
So
on trying to bring in more Black faculty and staff. It should be a value that you have to make sure that you have diverse voices in the classroom. It shouldn't, like
right.
what happened with DEI is After George Floyd was murdered, and you had this racial reckoning for a hot minute. Um,
Right.
it it was a sort of universities put out all these fake statements of solidarity. They said how they were going to do better, and they cared and were concerned. And it's like you didn't care, have this care and concern until it takes a black man having a foot on his throat, or
Right.
your knee on his throat
Right.
rather, in order for you
Yeah.
to care. And so I start to question, adding a couple of drops of ink, uh, black folks' ink spots is going to really help if your values are not right in the first place. Like,
Yes.
and so I think institutions, when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, could start with, what do you actually value, and be honest about it. And that's the thing that it kills me, is that people talk around it and like, oh, we value it. Okay, show me your evidence that you value it. Before I come into this institution,
Right.
I want to
Right.
see what you have done. And so when I got hired way back yonder, as faculty, uh, the department in women's studies, and I was in women's studies, and they said, look, we're not diverse. We need to be diverse. And so we want to make a strategic hire in hiring you as the first person. And I said, let me be clear about the work that I do. I do race and gender. I don't do race or gender. I do both. If you got a problem with it,
Right.
y'all need to be real clear who you're hiring. And I
Yes.
had about my fourth year, I had some pushback because I was doing work on black folks. Um, and they
Uh-huh.
said, well, you're not doing enough stuff on gender. I said, so black women are not women. And then they were like, no, no, no. What we mean is, I was like, what you mean is that
You,
you want me.
you know that always come afterwards. No, 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 no.
Yeah. And so it's just like, you want me to pick an identity, but both of them coexist in who I am. So,
Right.
pushing back, I had to push back. Like, look, and the reason why I could push back in ways that a lot of people couldn't is because I was an administrator before I was faculty. And so I knew if the faculty job didn't work, I can go back.
Um, what resources and support are available for students facing academic or personal challenges?
Uh, Generally, on most campuses, there's counseling services. There is at the at many, I'm not going to say all, predominantly white institutions, you have these black resource centers where students can go and find other students or staff members who can direct them to resources. You can always go to your black studies professor and
Mhm.
work with them because they can direct you where you need to go. So there's definitely resources on most university campuses. And even in the historically black colleges, there are similar types of counseling services, activities that people can get involved with. The tutoring center, most students don't take advantage of the tutoring center or the writing center, which
Right.
is part of your fees. So you paying people to, and you don't use the services. I had to tell
Right.
I
Right.
had to tell a couple students, like, you know what? Don't bring this paper back until you've gone to the writing center. And they were like, wait, you can't, you're not going to accept it? I said, nope, I'm not going to accept it until you show me evidence that you've gone to the writing center, because the student didn't know how to, really craft an essay. And I said, you pay for
Right.
this. You literally pay for it. So go use it.
Yeah. Might as well, like we said earlier, take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what's been your biggest challenge you faced so far?
Ooh, I think the biggest challenge in my academic career has been when I was department chair, and mostly because
Oh, okay.
I was balancing the administrative part of being department chair with my own responsibilities as faculty. So I was still teaching and doing research, but I was also managing budgets. I was evaluating personnel. I was hiring and firing folk, overseeing programs, dealing with student complaints. So that juggling act was was a bit tough. And so part of the reason why I moved into straight up administration is so that I don't have to juggle three things at once. I'm just
Right.
solely focused on administration. But I love research, so that's why I continue to write and publish, because it's something that
Okay.
I think the public. I consider my work to be like a public intellectual work, where I try to
Right.
write in such a way that lay people, regular folks, can pick up what I write and get
Right.
something
Right.
from it instead of making it so, I don't know, lofty and high ordered that nobody's going to pick it up.
Right. Is there a certain process or strategy that you use to approach the younger generation?
One of them is that I learn popular culture. I listen to their music. Some of it irritates me, but I'm over it. I grew, the golden era of hip hop for me was in the late 80s, early 90s, but because
Right.
I'm showing my age. But I listen to, what they're saying, and I balance my street slang with my, King's English.
Yeah.
I mix those things up, to signify to people that I can have a conversation across a lot of different audiences. And that has been
Right.
very helpful for me to reach out to younger students. And then then I stay, like when I see a student that's really like got potential, I stay on them. You know,
Yeah.
I call them
Yeah.
by their full government name across the campus. Like, come here. So they're like, uh-oh, my mama, like I have a lot of
Yeah.
students who are like, ooh, auntie, you remind me of my auntie or my mama. And I was like, yeah, because I need you to understand how much I care about you and how much I
Right.
care about your success, but I'm not going to take no bullshit off of you either.
Right. Right. Do you have kids?
I do not have kids. I am literally the auntie.
You didn't want any, or just? Well, I mean, with all the achievements you was doing, maybe you just didn't have time.
Well, my husband and I decided that we were going to travel. We were going to prioritize traveling. We
Okay.
were going,
Okay.
and then I taught for so many years. I taught junior high also. And so, I felt like, these are my kids. And
Right.
so
Right.
I'm the auntie that tries to be very available to. I got cousins that call me auntie because of the age difference, and one of my little cousins was like, "Can you do a lecture for my class?" Yeah, I could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, in your opinion, why has the idea of marriage changed in our community?
I think that for a lot of Black folks, we, I mean, there's a whole bunch of protections that come with marriage that people
Yes.
think is just a piece of paper, and they don't know that there's literally over 100 protections that come with being married. So, for instance, if I commit a crime, my husband don't have to say he know about it. He like the law says he doesn't have to testify against me. You
Uh,
know,
right.
if I want to pass on property to somebody, it's if I want to make decisions about when if I want to be resuscitated or not. You know, all of those protections that come with marriage, people don't even know about. And so we just say, oh, it's just a piece of paper. It's like you have reduced the protections down to a piece of paper, and it's literally pages
Yeah.
of protection. But
Right.
I think more
Right.
importantly, I don't think we understand that marriage and family is the centerpiece to building community, and that you can't build community without strong family
Yes.
units. And I also think that we get weary too quick. Like we throw in the towel way too fast.
Right. Right. Right.
Oh, this
Too quick to give up.
yeah, too quick to give up and not realize that it's not going to always be roses and loving. Sometimes you're going to fart, sometimes you're going to argue. Sometimes,
Right.
you're going to, they're going to turn on a TV show that you don't want to watch, but you sit through it because that's what marriage is.
Yeah.
And I've been married for 17 years and we've been together for 20 years.
Ooh.
And
Okay.
part of the reason why we're able to stick it out is because we recognize, one, there's benefits to marriage and companionship, but also we're grown enough to know that it's not going to be perfect all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
um,
Black woman on board.
yep.
The Claudia. Like, wait. Let me say the whole name of it. The whole title. The Claudia Hampton, the California State University, and the fight to save affirmative action. Right.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Yeah,
That book.
so this is a book that looks at the first black woman trustee in the California State University. And
Okay.
um, really what I wanted to do was to make sure people understood who the trustees were. So every university has either a board of governors, a board of regents, trustees, somebody who's
Right.
actually making decisions outside of your college president. They're the board of
Okay.
directors, whatever. And most people don't know that these folks have a lot of power to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And for a black woman to be appointed in 1974 by Ronald Reagan, who didn't like black people anyway, um,
Right.
to be
Right.
appointed by him is, like really unprecedented. Like, how did this happen? And so I wanted people to understand how that happened. And then on top of that, not just
Okay.
because she was the first, but because she was the most active in terms of making sure affirmative action was implemented. Because we had affirmative action in 1965 under the Johnson administration, but it didn't get enforced until 7 years later in most institutions. And in the Cal State system,
Right.
it didn't even get formally instituted for students until 1980. And so it
Wow.
took almost 15 years to get to full implementation. And this sister was behind the implementation of affirmative action.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
I wanted readers to understand the power of the trustees. I wanted to understand how many roadblocks were put up in terms of implementing affirmative action, and then the strategies she used to go around those roadblocks.
You speak about sly civility. What is that?
So sly
I was reading
civility.
about that.
Yeah, so sly civility is a resistance strategy, and it was first coined by this cultural theorist. His name was Homi Bhabha, and he was talking. In this case, he was talking about colonial India, and he was saying that in order for Indian people to get uncolonized or decolonized from the British, they would have to basically infiltrate these white British institutions and change them from
Right.
inside. And so the way
Right.
to do that is through sly civility. You pretend to be civil with the colonizer, take their resources, their know-how, their knowledge, and then you back channel, give it back to people in your community that need it. And so it's like
Mm.
working on the inside to change the institution, like you're a little plant on the inside.
Yeah. Right.
Uh-huh. And so it's really um it requires you, like, we always get, some of our folks that get into these institutions and they look out for themselves, right? I'm
Yes.
gonna make it to the
Yes.
top. Well, sly civility
Yes.
requires you to make sure the community comes along for the ride. So it's
Okay.
not
Okay.
about just you, it's about the entire
Right.
community benefiting from the work that you do.
I like that.
Hmm.
Well, last one, and I know you got a busy schedule to get back to.
Yeah.
What's a final thought, a final message that you would like to leave us with before you go?
um that's a good question. I really think that, now that affirmative action is more or less gone after the Supreme Court decision last year, that
Right.
um, Black folks are going to have to particularly look at institution building as our way to survive. And that we have the know how, we have the brain power, but what we What we're lacking is this kind of collective sense of urgency and collective sense of culture. You know, like,
Yes.
it's like we're doing stuff for the culture, and it's like, yeah, but is it always for the culture, or is it for you to make profit off of? You know,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I don't think that you should not do things for profit, but I also think that you have to do a cost benefit analysis. So let me explain.
Right.
We all, like Juneteenth is upon us, and folks out here selling all kind of products. Like, do we have a Memorial Day ice cream? No, we don't have a Veterans Day, plates that you can
Right.
buy at the store and decorations, but we got a bunch of stuff for Juneteenth, and it's usually that money does not get recycled into the community. It goes out of
Nope.
the community. Uh, I mean, look at the way our communities are set up. I'm thinking of one place out here in LA right now as a prime example. There's a church on one corner, there's a check cashing place, there's a liquor store,
Yes.
and there's a bank,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
In that scenario, where does the money get recycled on that street corner? It doesn't. The
Hmm.
check cashing place gonna take the money. The liquor store is owned by Koreans. The bank is owned by white folks,
Yeah.
and the church might do some programs in the community. But if you go to other neighborhoods, they got three banks on each corner, and then they might
Hmm.
have, let's say, they might have a grocery store. They're rotating that money in the community constantly. It goes from one bank to the other, and so they're
Hmm.
keeping the wealth in their community, just how
Yep.
their communities are situated. And so I think it's important for us, this is why education is important, to study how our communities are set up. Even just the layout of our communities make a difference in terms of, you know, whether whether that community is going to change in such a way that might not help the community. So,
Right.
the liquor store folks, um, they're giving us um, tobacco and
Hmm.
alcohol and probably some chili dogs if and some chili fries
Right.
if I know most black liquor stores targeted toward black folks. And so, at what point do we get healthy food into the community? You know,
Hmm.
and then if we go to the bank and ask them for a loan, a lot of us don't have the credit that's
Yeah.
necessary to create the businesses that we need. So I think that we have to develop some collective sense of how are we going to rebuild our communities, you know,
Yes.
uh, and not leave it to other people to dictate our destiny. And so,
Yes.
one of the things that I found important about the woman I just wrote this book about is that she set up institutions too. It wasn't just that she helped enforce affirmative action. There is it's called the California Academy of Math and Sciences. It is a STEM based
Hmm.
school targeted to Black and Latino students. She helped create that.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
um, she also was responsible for the creation. Well, they created it in her honor, but they created the first nonprofit healthcare clinic in one of the neighborhoods out here, and so
Uh-huh.
she had a legacy of institution building while she was working inside of predominantly white institutions. So you could do both and. She got money to the 100 Black men to create the Young Black Men Scholars Program. She helped them get a $500,000 grant from the state of California. So she was doing all of this stuff to not only work in their institutions, but she used their resources to create stuff for Black folks.
Right.
So if we have this kind of collective sense that our destinies are intermeshed with each other and that we start to
Hmm.
build institutions, build schools, and go back to boarding schools, black boarding schools. We used to have them all the way through
Yes.
the 70s or whatever. Take us out of these other schools that are maybe not working for us. Teach our kids how to play, stuff like that.
I think, I mean, just my opinion, I think the worst thing that happened to us was desegregation.
Well, yes and no.
I say that because once they got us in their schools, they were able to teach us how they wanted to.
Yeah.
and that's what changed. That to me, that's what changed everything, especially towards the future, because they attack the kids with the education system.
Fair point. But on the flip side is that because of desegregation, we got more black teachers than we ever had.
Okay.
So statistically speaking, we actually increased the number of black teachers. What was happening though is that as the same time schools were desegregating, white folks were taking the money out and creating charter schools. And so there's a racist origin of charter schools. They used to call them segregation academies. So our taxpayer
Okay.
dollars were going to create segregation academies.
Schools.
And so everybody's like,
That
I'm gonna put my kid in a charter school because it's better than the public school. It's like, you realize that they teach, like the historical origin of it is to separate, like to take your money and use it to advance somebody else. Uh,
right.
and so on one hand, I get what you're saying because we had a collective sense of destiny together, right? We had a
Hmm.
togetherness, but it was a forced togetherness.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
we didn't choose it. And so, what I'm talking about in terms of cohesion is something that we choose to do, not that something that's imposed
Okay.
on us. Because when it's imposed on us, as soon as one person get to break free, everybody gonna follow.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. I just think now, I feel like we should try to get back to doing it ourselves, having our own communities, having our own neighborhoods, our own schools, our own banks, hospitals. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and then even if we do create our own neighborhoods, they would just bomb the hell out of them anyway.
Black Wall Street.
Yep. Or what they did in Philadelphia, all those, more recent,
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the way to
Oh
do
yeah.
it is to actually infiltrate through their institutions and build out from there. So then they won't see.
It coming.
Yeah.
Well, I can't air that part. I'm gonna try to edit that out. So
That's but I mean it's true. I mean, because if
yeah, yeah,
whenever we do something and we put it out in the social media, they'll follow it and destroy it. I'm just
yeah,
thinking about
yeah.
even the most innocent thing.
Anything positive for us. That's why I'm kind of nervous about this platform because I had, I had a homeboy say, you're gonna get that visit, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, hey, somebody got to do it.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I mean, and
at
and
least try.
I think the sharing of ideas and getting people inspired, and even if they take something small, something really tiny,
Right,
you know,
right.
that is different than the trajectory that we've been on, right? I think is an improvement. And so I think, yeah, if I'm on paid taxes in the California State University system, why not infiltrate it and benefit my
Right.
folk?
Yeah.
You know,
To you know,
yeah,
Yeah, I got you. Where can we follow your work? I know you got a lot more that you had going on from what I read. We didn't have time. I knew
yeah,
but how can we purchase your book and follow more of your work?
yeah. So you can go directly to my website, which is Donna J Nicol Nicol.com, and go right to the
Okay.
research page, and that is where the links are to purchase the book. But I also have some audio clips of Claudia Hampton in her own words on the website, and I have
Yeah.
links to every.
Oh, that was her speaking.
That's her speaking.
Like that little minute
Hmm.
snippet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
okay.
able to get audio of her. She passed away in '94, but I found a
It's cool.
recording of her at the bottom of a box and was able to get permission to use it. Also,
Right.
I was involved with I co-authored the State of Black Los Angeles County Report. So it gives all the data
Yes.
for what's going on in LA. And so if you go on my website, you can directly click on the link. It's interactive website, so you can see abysmal result ratings on
Yeah.
pretty much everything. The only thing that we scored high on was actually going to the therapist, which is rare. Uh,
you know,
but every other measure, we got a lot of work to do. So in places like Los Angeles, that you people assume is progressive, and nope,
we got a lot of work to do in a lot of areas.
Yep.
I didn't even realize it. But thank you for being on the show,
Yeah.
sharing your story. Thank you for what you do,
Yeah.
for being an inspiration to our black women and our black girls. I got 3 daughters, so this right here is this. I couldn't wait for this.
Okay.
I couldn't wait to have this interview. But I appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Donna J. Nicol.
Thank you.